So thank you so much for joining us for the fourth episode of our Awarding Bodies Insights with the Experts. Today we're joined by Deborah Jenkins, Chair of the Board at NCFE. So thank you so much for joining us today, Deborah, and for your
thank you.
No problem at all. So we will launch straight in with our first question, which is, so as a chair of a large awarding organisation, I think the third largest at the moment in the UK, and when kind of considering the cognitive diversity that awarding organisations need, what benefits would you say an organisation might gain from having somebody from outside of the education and skills sector join their board?
Well, I think it's really interesting when you put together any board. You want a mix of the way that people think, and you want a mix of where people have come from. And if you think about awarding bodies, they are particularly in need of a diversity of thinking and experience. Because although there's a temptation, I think, of always to look first to people who are professionally in education, that actually, if we think about it, what we are about is learners and learning. So learners are going to come through our systems, and then they're going to go on to take their different places in the world. So I think it's very important for an awarding organisation board to have a lot of experience and different thinking styles that come from the worlds of business, from the worlds of social enterprise, perhaps, and even from understanding the sort of issues that the people that are coming through the education systems are going to face. So unless we have a board that is reflective rather than representative of different thinking and expertise, I'm not sure that one will give the best balance to the agenda that the awarding bodies need to cover.
No, absolutely. And I suppose everyone has their own experience of the education system as well, don't they, from different backgrounds and how they've come through those qualifications, those courses to where they are now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, people are coming from different social environments. A lot of the young people, particularly coming into FE, are going to be coming from pretty challenging backgrounds. So the problems that the people working with them on the front line have to face have to be understood by the people that are setting the qualifications. So everything from learning styles to what are going to be some of the barriers and challenges that the learners are going to have to overcome in order to be able to take advantage of the courses that they're doing.
Yeah, no, completely. And I guess to kind of flip that around on its head, that first question, what do you feel is the most rewarding thing about being a non-exec of an awarding organisation, and why do you think people from outside of the education and skills sector should be interested in joining this specialist area?
Well, I think awarding organisations, which, in parenthesis, most normal people would not understand what an awarding organisation does, so I'm sure I'm not alone into coming in as an outsider from the field to be on a quick learning curve. But I think it's the awarding organisations are the most brilliantly interesting intersection between system, which is looking at learning nationally or internationally, and the policy, and then the absolute frontline grassroots experience, the everyday experience of somebody who is going through a course or training. And so when you're on the board, and I found this myself, you are constantly having to encompass in your thinking both who are the learners that are going through our courses, how are we trying to think about their experience and their ability to succeed in what we're trying to put out there, how are we dealing with the middlemen, the training providers, the colleges and so on, who are having to manage and operationalize that learning, and then how does that fit into what the government's objectives on learning are, or the system's objectives are. So I think it's a very unusual non-executive position, and to be able to think about all those things simultaneously is very stimulating, very interesting.
Plus, I guess the highly regulated side of things as well, in terms of having to make sure that you're doing what the regulators want, as well as performing all of the other elements you've just mentioned.
Absolutely. I mean, you are answerable to lots of different regulators. And I think, like most of the non-executive positions that people will take up will have a degree of regulation involved in their organisation. And again, I mean, NCFE is a charity. So in addition to the professional regulation about education, there is also the regulation about how do you fulfill your charitable objectives? And again, it's a very interesting learning curve for people who haven't been in that environment before, but it's another factor in how you work. And another one that I would say is you have to be very conscious that because you are working with millions of people who are actually taking advantage of your services, there are also lots of reputational things that you have to steer through, and you have to be conscious that a decision that delays exams, for example, is going to have a lot of consequences that you are at the heart of having to deal with.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But I mean, you've been in non-exec positions. I think you said you became a trustee when you were 28, and have continued in non-exec roles alongside, obviously, your professional working career. Why do you think starting a non-exec role so early on in your career is beneficial?
I think, and you could set out to do it. I didn't set out to do it. I was approached. But what it gives you is a very interesting ability to be in a very different position within an organization. So for most people, you'll be on some kind of a career track, which is about working your way up an organization or a field. And you have to have a concentration on your speciality that you're developing in how you become good at the way you do something. If in parallel, you are also in a very different role within a different sort of organization, you both have the opportunity to learn about what that organization is doing and why it's doing it, but you're coming at it from a different angle. You have an accountability that is different. You have a duty to learn about the breadth of the organization, because you have to understand that organization's business, and you have to put yourself in the shoes of the people who work within that organization. So it's a very steep learning curve and a very broad learning curve that puts you into situations that you just wouldn't get being at that stage in your 20s or your 30s within your own organization, because you're working your way up a ladder. Whereas this is about having more of a bird's eye view and being accountable for it. So that I found it a very fast forwarding thing to do. And throughout my whole adult life, really, I've been very privileged to have the opportunity to get an understanding of and an appreciation of lots of different aspects of life and organizations and systems, and to have to learn in a very quick and intense way, and then take a responsibility and an accountability for it. And that I found a very enriching experience throughout my life.
No, absolutely. And I suppose as well, that strategic side, it gives you a great insight too as well, which obviously, we both know as you get to a point where you're looking at those really senior roles, executive suite level, that you need that strategic experience in order to get to that point, don't you?
Yes. Well, again, if I think, again, most people in life need to hold on to the detail of something which is about operational work and so on. If you want to advance to a very senior level in any organization or in the field that you've undertaken, there is a very different set of thinking skills that are needed, and an ability to step beyond the operational side. And of course, being a non-executive director puts you into every interview you ever have for being a non-executive. You will be asked about what is the difference between executive and non-executive, and the key answer is supposed to be, of course, one must never overstep the line into operational. And I think when you're a rookie non-exec, that's a really difficult thing to go through. Is you'll be introduced into the organization and into your board, and the first set of papers that you have, you start to want to asking the questions about why on earth have they taken this decision at this level, and can I see the detail on that, and so on. And I think when you're going up to that more senior level, whether on the executive or on the non-executive, you have to be able to step back and have that oversight for what is the difference between strategy and operational, but also how is that strategy rooted in the operational? Because a classic difficult situation for a non-exec to be in is not actually understanding the business to the degree in which they can be a safe steward of the overall strategy. And so I think cutting your teeth on being a non-executive, perhaps in a smaller organization to begin with, of getting an appreciation of the need to have the overview and the accountability, at the same time as not losing sight of understanding enough about how things are operational to be safe that you do understand it, is a very interesting career development opportunity. And it's one that the best chief executives never lose, because they are able to spend most of their time on the big strategic stuff and making sure that the organization is going in the right direction for the right motives. But they understand the detail as well, and they don't lose sight of that. Where the two get severed, you have a problem.
No, absolutely. And then obviously key to that relationship between the CEO and the board is obviously the chair role. And obviously you're chair at NCFE, which must be an amazing responsibility to have, especially with all the exciting things that NCFE have been involved in and continue to be involved in at the moment. And I'm sure there's a lot of people that really aspire to hold a chair role and, you know, sort of have that relationship, that direct relationship with CEO. But what would be your words of advice to aspiring chairs about what to expect when holding that role?
I think it certainly is a very exciting and interesting role to be the chair. But like most things in life, you know, the advantages are somewhat counterbalanced by an extra degree of accountability. And I think it's worth being appreciative of the fact that there is a difference between being a non-exec and between being the chair. And that is that almost inevitably, when you are chair of an organization, you will be at the pinpoint, together with the chief executive, of things that go wrong as well as things that go right. And it is the ultimate accountability of the chair sometimes to take those uncomfortable decisions that nobody wants to take, but in the end you can't avoid. The buck stops with the chair in the end, even more than it's kind of 1 degree more than it stops with the chief executive, I think. So it's very much taking on board, when one takes on those roles, that it will never always be plain sailing. And if one thinks it is plain sailing, then it's because one isn't aware enough of the risks, I think. Having said that, I think the relationship with the chief executive in the chair role is an enormously valuable and interesting one to have. You know, to be the sounding board for the chief executive, I think, is important. Sometimes you have to have quite tough conversations with your chief executive without overstepping that operational line. And I think occasionally, as a chair, you have to realise that your belief in the interests of the organisation doesn't chime with the rest of the organisation, and therefore you need to step away from it. But the other thing that I would say is that it is very much, for me, a three-legged stool when being a chair. I think you have to be very conscious and supportive of the needs of the chief executive, because in the end, they're the ones that are operationally accountable. You have to be very clear that you are completely interrelated with the non-execs on your board, because if you become separated from the non-execs of your board, you know, that never works in the long run. And the board, in my view, works best when it is working cohesively as a board to support the objectives of the organisation. And the third leg of the stool is the understanding of why your organisation is there, and are you connected, or how are you connected to the users and staff of your organisation? Because if you lose sight of that, I think any of those, if you lose sight of your colleagues on the board, if you lose sight of the chief executive, or you lose sight of the users of the organisation, actually things start to fall apart. They may not, you may be able to be Genghis Khan for a bit, but actually it will never work in the long run, and it doesn't achieve the aims of the organisation. So it's a fascinating balancing that is necessary to do.
No, absolutely. So very much soft skills and personality driven as much as it is kind of that technical knowledge and experience in that role as well.
I think so. And sometimes you need a different sort of person. I mean, sometimes you need somebody who is technically phenomenal to sort of sort something out, get things on the right lines. Sometimes, but I think in most cases you need a degree of emotional intelligence to be able to balance all those. But then I would say that's probably true for anybody who's, you know, at the senior ranks of most organisations. You know, it's very rare that you can get a Genghis Khan that makes it work.
Absolutely. And finally, Deborah, what would you say to anyone who thinks that being a non-exec is not for them?
Well, I mean, obviously it's up to everybody's judgment, but I think I would invite people to question themselves quite hard as to whether actually there is something that they will personally get out of it. So I think sometimes you can be driven by your philanthropic objective to go and help a particular organization, and that's great. It may be though that you haven't ever considered yourself on the other side of that line from executive to non-executive. And I think people who are successful at what they do will very often have experience and skills and ability to think in certain ways that is enormously valuable on the other side of that equation of bringing something to being a non-executive director. And I would urge people to really think about it and think both what they can bring to it, but also what they can gain from it. And as I've said sometimes when we've been recruiting non-executives to different boards and organizations, from the organization's perspective, you're asking people to take on an accountability. And so therefore, somebody who's thinking about being a non-executive needs to think about what accountability they're taking on. But you're also asking people for a relatively very low time commitment. And sometimes you're thinking from an organizational point of view, you're appointing somebody for 3 years. They might be coming for 4 meetings a year with a couple of extras. So 6 times 3, 18 times that you might be encountering this person, plus whatever else they want to put into it. So from being a non-executive, you're also thinking, well, this may be 18 days over 3 years. That's not an enormous commitment, but that's an enormous opportunity, both for me and for the organization. So how do I make it as intense and valuable and enriching as I possibly can? And so I would really encourage people to think about it. You don't fit in life into just exec or just non-exec. The only things I would say is that if you're the sort of person who always thinks that you know how to run the organization, then it might not be the career for you. Because one thing that you can never do as a non-executive is run the organization. That's given to the executives.
That's brilliant. Fantastic, Deborah. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate your thoughts and your insights, and I'm sure everyone watching will as well. We'll be back soon with another episode of Awarding Insights. So look forward to seeing you then. Thank you again, Deborah.
Thank you very much, and good luck to everybody who's applying. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.